It's day 4 of Inktober, and that means 4 days into it. Stick to the end, and I'll talk about the character being drawn here, but let's first talk about stakes. Not meat stakes, not vampire stakes, we're talking about character stakes. I've been asked a few times about character stakes, how to write them, how to raise them. So let's first start by talking about what a stake is. And a stake is what is at risk if your character fails. Therefore, raising stakes means that you put more at risk or you make the odds of failure greater. If you're really feeling particularly evil, you can torture your character by doing both of those things at once. And yeah, all is kind of well and simple in that regard. But that doesn't really answer the question of what is at risk and how do I push those odds. Kind of the gut reaction to adding stakes is to make the problems bigger, like end the universe with a huge monster. I've been there. There's nothing wrong with that. I love doing that. That's great. But world-ending monsters aren't the end-all be-all of stakes. Because at the end of the day, the end of the world, I guess it is the literal end of the day, but either way, the end of the world is an impersonal thing, and we've seen it a million times in fiction. Like, character stakes are about making big things like that personal. The world can end, sure, but what does that mean for your character, and what specifically do they have at risk? One of the most common ways to add personal connections to this is to put something or someone that the character loves at risk, and this is a good idea, totally behind this, but you just need to be careful about your overuse of this kind of trope aspect thingy and of how you use it. So if the person you are putting at risk could easily be replaced with an object that your character loves, you might have a problem there that you want to address. Like, make sure your characters are characters if you're putting them at risk. Don't just use, like, pets. Pets get this pretty bad. It's like no one wants to see a dog hurt, so you add a dog, and that is stakes. There's more to it than that. You can flesh things out more. Try harder. Make it more personal. Like, if you aren't doing that, if you can't put the world at risk, and you can't put things that the character loves in danger, like then what? Like, what do you do? I unfortunately gotta say, like, I don't have a very specific answer for you because character stakes are personal. I'll repeat that one. Like, character stakes are so personal. And your character might very well care deeply about the end of the universe, and you can portray that, and if it's believable, it'll be believable, and we will feel it because we will feel what the characters are feeling. And if your character literally doesn't care about anything else other than this object, this character, this pet, whatever, then that's fine, and you can develop that and make that a strong connection, and when you put the thing at risk, it'll be powerful, and it can be powerful, and I don't want to undermine that aspect of it. But also consider that there are other things that you can put at risk for a character. You can put their values at risk, challenge them morally on things that they believe. Like, that's a very strong one that you can do. You can challenge their sense of self, their sense of person. You can challenge their life. That one gets a little difficult because what if they have main character armor? But if they don't, go ahead, challenge their life. That's something that can be put at stake. Or you can think of other internal aspects of the character that can be lost or given up or anything. But the point is, again, make it personal. And also, characters don't have to have just one thing at stake. People are multifaceted. They care about a lot of things. There's so much you can put at risk. There's so much you can damage. It's great. It's fun. It's terrible. I'm a terrible person, but it's great. It's great, okay? Like, the real trick here is less on what you pick. I mean, that's half the battle, but it's also about how you put forth these things. So instead of ordering them in how big they seem, like, in relation to your world, unless you're trying to ramp up stakes about the world ending consequences and trying to make it, like, you know. But either way, what am I saying? Instead of focusing entirely on making all of these events larger and larger, think about making them more personal and more directly related to your character. Like challenge their values with like what is weakest and then move up to the strongest one. Like what they hold dearest should be in most danger at the end. You need some space to move up. So like I was watching me and Ursula are watching Lord of the Rings currently, so like that's on my brain. It's always on my brain. But Frodo starts his adventure knowing very well that the world could end. Like that is his initial motivation, but he doesn't really become invested and care about this world until he realizes that, oh, maybe like the Shire is also going to be destroyed. Like he goes to Lothlorien and he looks in the pool and he sees all his friends being like rounded up by orcs, and it becomes a lot more real to him. It becomes a lot more personal, and that's sort of the aspect of stakes that you need to consider. How do you make it personal? Because your character is going to be followed by your reader, and your reader is inherently, well, not inherently, but your reader is very likely going to follow them and very much care about the things that they care about. And that's the goal with stakes. It's about making these things quantifiable. It's about making them personal. It's about making it real. So yeah, I hope that helps. I hope that was a good talk on character stakes. I hope that was what you're looking for. So all of that leaves me to talk about my character. Yay. Okay, I hope you like these. This character comes from the Evil Fairy Kingdom RP, which was brought up in my very first video. I'm gonna have a link to it right now in the up above thing that goes boop, and you're like, I'm scared. Remember annotations? Anyways, yeah, so this character comes from the Evil Fairy Kingdom. He's a human. He is not a fairy. His name is Edwin, and he's my darling. He was my very favorite character in the original version of this RP. He's still pretty close to my heart. I definitely have one character that I love the most, who's awful. But let's talk about Edwin today, because she'll come up later. So Edwin is a fairymancer, and that means that he has the power to stop curses and to rid fairy magic of things, basically. And this is really strange because basically the way that magic works in this world is that like there's a spectrum of magic. There's this really dark magic that's like super concentrated called like Ichor, which we have decided recently, and it's controlled by the Northern Queen, and it's like infectious and evil and terrible. And then there's like regular amounts of magic, which is kind of like chaotic neutral. It does what it wants. It's like the source of like fairy power, and it manifests in all sorts of different ways. And then there's fairymancy, which is the absence of magic, and all humans are completely absent of magic, which makes them very susceptible to fairy curses. So if you are cursed in the fairy world, it can never fully be uncursed. Like if you get a curse removed, it'll leave like a magical stain upon you. So like if you were turned into like a cat, you'd always be a little bit cattish for like the rest of your life. If you were able to like escape into the human world, it's very likely that you would just turn into a cat forever. If you were turned into a cat, it's very difficult to turn a human back into a human. You can turn them into all sorts of other things, because cats aren't as like sticky to magic as humans are. Humans are like toddlers with like their sticky little hands all the time. It's like jam on their fingers, and they're like, you look at them and you're like, ugh, why are you covered in magic? But since Edwin is a fairymancer, he isn't susceptible to that. And he's a fairymancer because like his whole family is like a line of fairymancers. It like skips certain generations. It's like genetic or something. He doesn't know this because he's lost a lot of his memories. And by lost, I mean he gave them up. So, like, Edwin is basically Little Red Riding Hood. So, like, when he was a kid, he lived in, like, a little human village. And he was a normal human boy. And then he was asked to go to his grandpa's house, who lives in the woods. He lived... Old Man Ruddy is his name. His grandpa's Old Man Ruddy. And Old Man Ruddy lives in the woods, and he lives at the end of like this path that you can't stray off of, otherwise you end up in the fairy world. And since Ruddy is a fairymancer, he's like kept this path clean, and he kept kept the little house clean, no fairies, no BS, everything's fine. Unfortunately, Edwin strays off the path. More so, he's kind of like tricked off of the path by a fairy, and this fairy switches places with him, and basically takes over Edwin's entire life. The fairy goes and lives with Edwin's mom and like feeds off of her, basically like siphons off her life force, and the fairy eventually takes over his whole entire town. In the meantime, Edwin kind of gets stuck in the fairy world, and he's very lost and confused, and a helpful owl is like, oh, don't worry, I can give you advice, but I'm gonna need you to trade one of your memories. And so he does that, and he gets some help, but he also doesn't know where he's supposed to go anymore, and he kind of gets stuck in the fairy world for basically the rest of his life. And anytime he needs advice, he just gives up his memories. But all of this has kind of left him unable to hold things in his head very long, so he forgets things all the time. He's very strange because he doesn't really understand humans at all. So, like, he eventually comes into the RP because, he meets up with Cordelia and Eve when he's taking a little travel into the human world, because he wants to kind of inspect like what's going on with like this new kingdom that's shown up out of nowhere. And Eve and Cordelia think he's very suspicious. He is kind of being suspicious, and when he sees someone taken off by goblins, he's like, oh, whatever, who cares, goblins, they'll do that. And basically he ends up acting as like a guide for them once they get into the fairy world. They don't very much trust him because everything he says sounds kind of sketch to them. They're like, what do you mean you can never undo a curse? You sound like you're doing fairy lies. And he's like, why would I lie about something like that? And they're like, we don't trust you. Cordelia eventually kind of becomes his friend in this draft of it. She starts to realize that, okay, he knows what he's talking about. The fairy world is just BS entirely, and he's just explaining the BS. And she kind of she tricks him into staying with them and helping them, because he can't remember things for very long. So he's trying to collect dryad tears. He doesn't know why the owl told him to do it. It has something to do with like eventually helping his family out who has been cursed by the fairy forever ago. He doesn't remember this, but he knows he has to get dryad tears, so he keeps forgetting that he needs to get them because he's Edwin. And what ends up happening is like Cordelia's like, anytime he asks like what's going on, Cordelia's like, oh, you're just helping us with tracking down this, or oh, you're just helping us get to the kingdom because Eve needs help. And he's like, why would I agree to something like that? And they're like, I don't know, you just did, Edwin. And he's like, okay, I guess so, I guess we're doing this. We're not super far into his plot right now because like Eve has been taken. He's traveling with Cordelia to go to the Western Kingdom to save her. Going to be a princess in another castle situation, and they're going to go back to Frostfell where he was born to figure out like what's going on there, because right now he's collected the dryad tears and he went to the owl, and the owl was like, okay, I'll take your memories, and okay, you're taking these to the infested village in Frostfell. And he's like, okay, I'm doing this, but he keeps forgetting. And Cordelia's like, fine, let's go here. Let's figure out what's going on with this fairymancy stuff, because that'd be very helpful. And I'm very upset that my girlfriend is now in the evil kingdom and the world's terrible. So let's go fix this. Let's figure it out. And everyone's like, okay. Everyone's just like sweet. Like in the first draft, he was meant to be kind of like evil, and he was more fun, but he didn't make sense as a character. Like because you know, they never mesh well once you start like fleshing them out. Like he used to like collect things and like kill fairies and use their different bits for like potions and stuff, but none of that ended up making sense. So he's just a lot more likable as a person. He's very neutral about things, which can be sort of frustrating, but I think in this one he definitely has like some sense of like good about him, and he doesn't want people to be upset because he's still a human and he still kind of like innately understands emotion. Like he's emotional about things even though he forgets the event or like forgets what's surrounding it. Like when he thinks about his past, he's sad and angry about it, but he doesn't know, and he'll very quickly forget what he was even thinking about, and he's just like, well, I'm just angry for no reason. But he doesn't like he doesn't go into like rages or anything crazy. He eventually needs to learn fairymancy because he'll be very helpful for them in destroying all the evil of the kingdom. Yeah, that's Edwin. He's not too much to talk about. I hope he gets to do more. I like this drawing of him. Very much appreciated. So yeah, I hope this was a good talk. I didn't have to explain the whole kingdom. That's probably why this took less time. Thank you for watching. I'll be back, not tomorrow, day after tomorrow. Tomorrow's my birthday. Wish me happy birthdays. Give me a high five. Give me extra high fives. Give me 2 high fives, maybe 5. Yeah, and add stakes to your character. Just staple stakes to them. If they're a vampire, add a stake, because get out of here. Vampires are bad boys. Go to your room, you undead coffin boy. Okay, bye.